everyone. We're so happy to have you here today. I'm Dr. Berkowitz. I'm a board member from ISP. And as a reminder, in case you're not sure which org you landed at today, ISP, Influencing Social Policy, is a national organization that engages social workers in policy research, practice, and teaching to advance social and economic policies that promote human well-being and social justice. We believe social workers should play a central role in shaping policy at local, state, and national levels through means like webinars, policy resources, leadership development, and membership engagement. ISP helps strengthen the field's capacity to move from policy knowledge to policy action. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about us, you can go to www.influencingsocialpolicy.org. I'll put that in the chat in just a second. A few things for you to keep in mind. First, feel free to put any questions you have for Dr. Abramovitz in the chat. She's going to be speaking for about 40 minutes. You can also share any relevant resources there that you think others might find interesting or relevant. And we will be doing a Q&A after the initial presentation. So we'll grab your questions and save them for later. And now I'm going to turn it over to our fantastic ISP president, Dr. Gary Parker, for a few more thoughts.
Unmute.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
This is what happens when as soon as you get over 50, technology can't figure it out anymore. So thank you so much, Allison, for that introduction. And thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate having our amazing board members as part of ISP. I wanted to share, folks, with you just a little bit about Macro United, which is a conference that we're organizing in 2027, which is exclusively for macro social work research, practice, and teaching. And it brings together social work educators and students and practitioners and researchers and advocates and organizational leaders who are working to advance systemic change, community practice, leadership, and systems level transformation. So it's rooted in collaboration across the macro social work community. We're working with the other major macro social work, national social work organizations, and it just creates a safe space to share ideas, to build relationships, and to strengthen the field's collective voice. If you want more information about that conference coming up in 2027, you can go to macrounited.org and sign up for our email list, and then you'll get all of the good stuff. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We have a sensational, spectacular speaker joining us today, and we're absolutely honored to have Dr. Mimi Abramovitz, who is the Bertha Capen Reynolds Professor Emerita at the Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College, of which I am an alum. Dr. Abramovitz is a nationally and internationally recognized scholar, educator, who has shaped the field of how the field understands social welfare policy, poverty, women's rights, and the U.S. welfare state. She is also the author of the seminal work, Regulating the Lives of Women, of which I proudly hold an autographed copy. That's right, I do. And her scholarship and advocacy has influenced generations of social workers committed to policy change and social justice. And I would put myself in that category as well. I've known Mimi since the 19s, and I really credit her with my pursuit of getting a PhD. She was just so incredibly encouraging and thoughtful and generous with her time, as she will be today. So please give a warm round of applause in the chat and welcome Dr. Mimi Abramovitz. Welcome, Mimi. Yay.
Thank you, Gary. Do you have my title slide up?
I do. I'm going to get it right now.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm going to go into share. And there we go. You're up.
Okay. So now you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is first, so thank you. So Gary, I just thank you for that lovely, warm, and almost unrecognizable introduction. I often when I hear that, I say, maybe you should introduce me to that person. So I want to thank you and ISP for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I am a former member of the ISP board, so it's really nice to connect with the organization, the new board members, and with you, Gary, my dear friend and colleague. And I also want to thank everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this webinar happen. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you in the room who took time to join us today. And the timing is especially perfect for me because the invitation came just as the fourth edition of that book that Gary has my signature on was published, Regulating the Lives of Women, Social Welfare Policy from Colonial Times to the Present. It just came out in the fourth edition. And this talk will build directly on that work. So I'm calling this talk, Make the Family Great Again, with the subtitle, Updating the Welfare State Rulebook. This means that I'll be talking about the welfare state a little differently than we usually do, not as a safety net, which is what we usually hear about, but as the title says, a rule book that has long shaped and often regulated the lives of women. Next. So I'd like to just give you a preview of what I'm going to cover. So I'm going to talk about what drew me to write this book and an interest in the topic, why I think of the welfare state as a rule book. And then I'm going to focus on two rules, the work ethic and the family ethic. Talk about how race fits into this picture, and then highlight Project 2025 as a playbook for an authoritarian welfare state and as a threat to democracy. And finally, I see the welfare state as a site of struggle. My hope is to expose this rulebook clearly enough so that we can begin to rewrite it in ways that expand rather than restrict women's lives, and in do so, deepen democracy for everyone. So let's get into it. And now you are free to stay or leave, and then you can blame your Wi-Fi for your absence if you leave. Next. What drew me to this? Well, I didn't start out as an academic. I started out as a welfare caseworker in Connecticut, carrying a large AFDC caseload. Day after day, I visited the apartments of impoverished women who were doing everything right, trying to survive, to care for their children, to navigate a system that was supposed to help them, but too often made their lives harder. These women were my first teachers. After 2 years, I decided to go to social work school. Along the way, I joined the civil rights and women's movements. These turbulent times gave me something that graduate school alone could not. They helped me to connect the personal struggles of the women I'd worked with to the larger forces shaping their lives. The problem wasn't them. It never was. Graduate study at Columbia and years of teaching social policy at Hunter College's Silberman School of Social Work and the CUNY Graduate Center gave me the tools I needed to dig deeper and the language to say more clearly what I felt in that welfare office so long ago. I came to understand at least two important things. First, public policy is never neutral in women's lives. Never, not once, not anywhere, and that's underscored. And second, women are not incidental to the welfare state. They are the welfare state. They make up the majority of welfare recipients, the majority of social workers, and the majority of poor people in this country. This insight led me to a question that I couldn't shake. What role does the welfare state actually play in women's lives? That question became a book, Regulating the Lives of Women, and as I said, now in its fourth edition. But the women I met in Connecticut never left me. Next. A bit of background. Most of you on this call know that government aid to the poor has been with us since colonial times. And you also know that the welfare state as we know it emerged during the Great Depression in the 30s. Some say to save capitalism from itself. It expanded for roughly 40 years after World War II, and for many people, it actually delivered the goods, a genuine leg up, real security, a floor beneath which you could not fall. Then came the 1980s. Opponents of big government began rolling it back, a retreat that never stopped, never really stopped. Its most recent and most dangerous expression in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. That is the most recent expression, and I'll be talking more on that later. But this tidy story hides a more complicated history, and two things in particular get left out. The first is language. You may or may not know that the word welfare has been deliberately weaponized. Technically, it refers only to cash assistance for poor mothers, a small, unpopular, inexpensive program, really. However, opponents systematically misuse the term to tar all social programs or the entitlements, including ones like Social Security, that benefit the middle class as well. And I contend this wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate strategy. The second point is that the welfare state has been shaped by three powerful forces: individualism, market ideology, and deeply rooted stereotypes about class, race, and gender. And these forces just didn't arrive and distort something that was once pure and that they were never there. They were there at the founding. They are baked in. The result: the U.S. welfare state has always been less generous and less popular than those of other Western nations. Next, please. But even this expanded history doesn't tell the whole story. Here's what it leaves out. From the start, the welfare state wasn't just a safety net. It was a rule book. As I said, a system for regulating the lives of women. Its architects built the entire structure around one specific family model: white, middle-class, heterosexual family. A male breadwinner, a full-time homemaker, and their children. He was expected to work. She was expected to stay home, raise the next generation, and instill the values that hold society together. That was the blueprint, and everything else was built on top of it. The problem, as you all well know, is that many families did not, could not, or even chose not to live this way. And so the government stepped in to make sure that they did. That is, since colonial times, the government has used access to public benefits as leverage to ensure that men and women carried out these socially assigned roles. And the rule book has two main rules. You've heard of one, the work ethic. Explicit and well known. You earn your place in society through paid labor. Thus, reliance on the state or anyone else is something to be ashamed of. The second rule is one that most people have never heard of, the family ethic. Unspoken, rarely named, but equally powerful. It's been hidden in plain sight until now. The welfare state, thus, did not reflect the gendered social order. It actively reproduced it. Next. More on the work ethic. As I said, for men, the rule was simple: work. For decades, policymakers worried that access to cash benefits would weaken or sap men's motivation to work and lead them to choose a government check over low-paid labor. To prevent this, the welfare state began to enforce what became known as the work ethic. It tied benefits to wages and to an unbroken employment record. Men who fit the model were rewarded, seen as industrious, deserving of unemployment insurance, Social Security, the GI Bill, these programs that built the American middle class. Those who didn't fit the gendered model, were penalized, called lazy and undeserving of help. And here's the part that rarely gets said out loud. The work ethic was never just about work. From the very beginning, it was tangled up with race, and more on this later. Next. So, what about the women? Well, you can see the work ethic was never designed with women in mind. It followed male work patterns and obscured, if not ignored, the lives of women whose place society defined as in the home, even when they worked outside. So to bring women into view, I coined the term the family ethic, the idea that a, quote, a good woman's place is in the home, married, raising children, and economically dependent on a male breadwinner. Now, policymakers weren't worried that women would choose benefits over work in most cases. Rather, they feared that women would choose public benefits over marriage and home. Just as the welfare state judged men by their compliance with the work ethic, it judged women by their compliance with the family ethic. Women who fit the model were rewarded. Women who did not, could not, or chose not to do so, single mothers, divorced women, working mothers, they were penalized. The rules, which favored married women and non-working wives over single, divorced, and employed women, fell heavily on all poor women. But they fell hardest on women of color once they were allowed into the system at all. The underlying message was blunt. Offer decent benefits to single mothers or working women, and you undermine marriage and women's dependence on men, the latter viewed by feminists as the linchpin of patriarchy. Therefore, benefits must be kept low and noncompliance punished to deter interest in welfare, but also to make sure that all women get the message. Depend on a husband, not the state. Women who might think about welfare state benefits in the future needed to hear this too. Next. So let's look at the rule book in action. The family ethic. So we're going to look at the family ethic in public assistance, Social Security, and unemployment insurance. Those are the three programs covered in the book. Next. So starting with public assistance. Originally was aid to dependent children. Now it's temporary aid to needing families. Was created to help single mothers and their children survive poverty. But it was never just an income support program. From the start, as I said before, it enforced the family ethic. It did so through underfunding the program, that's a punishment for single mothers, providing meager benefits, intrusive oversight, and relentless policing of women's behavior, women viewed as not complying with the family ethic. The colonial poor laws, do you remember them? The mother's pension and AFDC all included some version of a suitable home or man in the house test that demonized women based on their marital status and so-called immoral behavior. Over time, the names of the programs and the tests changed. Family caps to discourage more children, time limits to discourage long-term use. More recently, states added drug testing and fingerprinting to TANF. But the logic itself never changed. The message has been the same for 400 years. Poor single mothers, especially Black women, are inherently suspect and must be disciplined. To justify the harshness, policymakers reached for a racialized stereotype of known as the welfare queen, who was lazy, cheated the system, and had kids for money. Unfortunately, this mean-spirited caricature was politically effective. It built ongoing support for punitive rules and deeper cuts. The 1996 welfare reform finished the job. AFDC became TANF, time-limited, less generous, more punitive. Today, only a fraction of the women eligible receive any help at all. And the women I met in Connecticut weren't failing the system. The system failed them. Next. Many of you will recognize the family ethic in AFDC, but how many of you know that it's also built into more popular social insurance programs serving the largely white middle class, like Social Security? The Social Security program looks gender and race neutral on paper, but guess what? It isn't. The program has two tiers. Primary beneficiaries would have to have a strong continuous work record, and these have historically been white men. And the second tier is dependent beneficiaries who claim benefits through a male work record, historically white women. What the program promises the women and what it does are not the same, and this plays out in a couple of ways. The program, because it ties benefits to market wages and uninterrupted employment, these patterns reflect male work patterns. Therefore, women are penalized twice. First, they're penalized by the labor market that pays them low wages and rarely offers, or maybe a little more today, a paid parental leave. But they're also penalized by the welfare state because it bases these benefits on wage levels and steady work. The results, women only qualify for low benefits or not at all. These rules reward economic dependence on men. An unemployed wife may claim benefits on her own work record or 50% of her husband's, whichever is higher, but not both. The economically rational choice more than often becomes the spousal benefit. And here's the rub. Women who worked and paid Social Security taxes for years receive more in benefits in retirement as a dependent spouse than as a worker. She also collects the same amount as a full-time homemaker who never worked and never contributed a dime to the system. The message, again meant for all women, is clear. When it comes to retirement income, you're better off having depended on a male breadwinner than working for wages outside the home. Again, the family ethic. And divorce is also punished because divorced women are obviously leaving marriage. Spousal benefits that go to divorce people require at least 10 years of marriage. In the beginning, it was 20 years. Marriage for 9 years and 11 months, nothing, because you broke the rules. In some cases, these kind of rules can pressure women to stay in unhappy or even dangerous marriages because there's no way out economically. Next. Unemployment insurance. It tells the same story. It also looks gender neutral, but it isn't. Like Social Security, its benefit formula is based on male work patterns. To qualify, you must be available for full-time work and continuous employment. And women who are more likely to work part-time or step away from work for caregiving can't clear that high bar. And then it gets worse. To collect benefits, and then if you have done so, you may recognize this, you must be jobless through no fault of your own. That is, you cannot quit voluntarily unless you had what the law calls a good cause. Sounds reasonable until you look at the list of good causes. In many states, the reasons that women, and only women, leave jobs are not on this list. Pregnancy, lack of child care, domestic violence, following a relocating spouse. In most states, none of these qualify as good cause. So the women are stuck. But women lose benefits precisely when they need them most. Not because they made bad choices, but because the rules were written around a worker who was never them. Next. Race matters. From the beginning, all three Social Security Act programs reproduced the systemic racism found in wider society. And gender and race compounded each other, with Black women getting the shortest end of the stick. Next. So here's how racism was built into the system. It wasn't a flaw, it was a planned feature. And that's really important to realize. Many of you know that all three programs deliberately excluded agricultural and domestic workers, the only occupations open to most Black workers in the 30s when the Social Security Act was put into place. This was not by accident. This rule was set up that way to give white Southern farmers control over Black labor. Result, if they had welfare benefits, they could not work in the cotton fields, like things like that. The result was a two-tier system, one that protected white women but pushed Black women into the more punitive welfare or public assistance programs and locked them out of the more protective and generous social insurances. These exclusions eased somewhat in the 50s, but their effects continue. One of the many troubling outcomes, while white women collect Social Security benefits during the wealth building years when the family's working, Black families did not and do not. This contributed directly to today's racial wealth gap, which is something we don't usually think of when we think about Social Security. You can think of it as a wealth transfer hidden in a benefit formula. Next. Let me put some more meat on these bones. We're going to look at these three programs on the slide. Public assistance. The exclusion of Black male workers from the Social Security retirement program, as I mentioned before, meant that widowed Black women could not access the program's spousal or survival benefits. So their only option was to turn to the less popular then ADC program, which is noted above, used suitable home and man in a house and other rules to penalize or actually disqualify single mothers defined as immoral. The program's expansion in the 60s, well, through the 50s, 60s, and 70s triggered a racialized backlash that blamed Black women for this program's growth, denied them assistance, and gutted the program. And to justify the cuts, the program's critics blamed its growth on immoral behavior, the same immoral behavior, Black single mothers, and continued to claim that Black women were lazy, cheated the system, and had kids for money. What did they ignore? They ignored conveniently poverty, systemic racism, and systemic sexism, among other things. The 1996 welfare reform law was the final blow. It converted welfare from an entitlement program into a temporary assistance program and tightened the eligibility rules. Welfare or reform, or TANF, effectively ended welfare as we knew it, as promised by President Clinton. So what about Social Security and unemployment insurance? The racialized treatment of Black women by these two programs is less well known, but equally troubling. Benefits based on earnings and continuous employment reproduce the racism as well as the sexism built into the labor market. Labor discrimination, occupational segregation, and the last hired first fired practices leave Black women out in the cold, that is, with lower benefits and lower lifetime earnings. Other rules do the same. Black Americans have shorter life expectancies than white persons. Therefore, although Black and white women pay into the Social Security program throughout their working years, Black women collect benefits for fewer years because they die earlier. In effect, those who die first are subsidized by better off people who those who die first subsidize better off people who live longer. Black women face higher rates of unemployment but receive the lowest unemployment insurance benefits due to their lower wages, greater caregiving responsibilities, geographic concentration in stingy southern states, lower program awareness, and pervasive employer and bureaucratic racial discrimination. The bottom line, Social Security and unemployment insurance was supposed to provide the greatest protection to those who need it most. For Black women, it provides the least. Next. So now you may be thinking, haven't things changed in women's lives and family structures? Isn't the family ethic done with? Yes, women work, women vote, women run corporations and countries. Yes, women's progress and increased autonomy have challenged the idea that a woman's place is in the home. But At the same time, family structures have also changed. The rising economic insecurity of working class men has battered the male breadwinner ideal. We also have less marriages, fewer children, and same-sex marriages. Instead of these changes challenging the family ethic, we are living through another backlash. Certain political leaders have decided that, quote, the family is in, quote, crisis. They intentionally whip up fears about the destruction of the American family to push policies that the public would not otherwise accept. You may have heard of Naomi Klein. She calls this the shock doctrine, the manufacture or amplification of a crisis, then using it to push through measures that people would otherwise resist. So underneath the family crisis rhetoric lies something uglier: lower white birth rates and rising immigration by people of color. Some leaders see these democratic trends as an existential threat to the survival of the the white race. You may have heard of their great replacement theory, which says that the white populations are deliberately being replaced, quote unquote, by persons of color, both native and foreign born. This once fringe theory has gained considerable traction. Their solution: deportation of immigrants and more white babies. Next. Enter Project 2025. The Trump administration, this is the Trump administration's policy blueprint. It views the welfare state benefits as an economic rival to marriage and a threat to women's economic dependence on men. It proposes numerous ways to restore the weakened family ethic. First, it calls on government to endorse a biblically based definition of marriage and family and to use the power of the state to confront every threat to its stability. It defines the, quote, right kind of family, just like it does in the family ethic, a heterosexual couple and their children, and promotes the family as the foundation of a well-ordered nation. It uses fear of the family in decline and shock doctrine to restore family as the centerpiece of American life. In short, it seeks to make the male breadwinner, female homemaker, model, or family great again. Next. And this is where things turn serious. The family ethic supporters do not tweak individual policies or try to restore the family ethic here and there. No, Project 25 moves us from piecemeal and recognizable policy adjustments to less visible and often unmentioned structural changes that are hard to see and hard to change. That is, they have upped the ante. Their strategy is to push or restore the family ethic in the welfare state from the ground up. And here are some of the things that they want to do. Rename the Department of Health and Human Services Department of Life, sort of like the Defense Department is the Department of War. Purge all references to gender equality, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and abortion from federal laws, agency websites, and grants. Officially define the family as a man married to a woman and their children, a heterosexual couple. Direct family funds through a family-first agenda, exclusively to programs that encourage marriage, motherhood, fatherhood, and nuclear families. But that's just the headline. The troubling details really go much further. Next. Its first and easiest target was welfare, the long demonized as serving undeserving single Black mothers. First, Project 2025 doubled down, punishing single mothers even more by tightening the program's existing time limits, strict family caps, and harsh work requirements. Then, to reduce the size, quality, and reach of other programs for the poor, didn't stop with public assistance as it had been for a long time. It applied these same behavior modification rules to programs that they never had such rules, such as federal housing assistance, Medicaid, SNAP, school meals, home energy assistance, child care programs, and I'm sure others. So they've extended it to other means-tested programs that never had work requirements. I think you've heard a lot about Medicaid and SNAP recently in this regard. In addition to visible policy changes to penalize poor single mothers, it added marriage promotion features to programs serving the working class as well as the poor. Next. Project 2025's marriage promotion strategy includes, I'm going to restate just what's on the slide, expanding faith-based healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood programs to teach low-income fathers and couples how to become marriageable. Redirect Title X family planning funding away from reproductive health care and towards marriage promotion, which makes it easier for employers to also exclude contraceptive coverage. Using child welfare funds for marriage education, replacing Head Start and child care centers with tax credits for stay-at-home moms, making it harder for women to work outside the home, and using child support system to discourage divorce and encourage marriage, and to make it more difficult for custodial parents to receive child support. Promoting abstinence only until marriage sex education, restricting no-fault divorce despite evidence that it reduces domestic violence and female suicide. And finally, using tax policy to reward larger families, larger credits for married parents at the birth of a child, and additional benefits for families of 3 or more. And that's not all. Next. Then there is this, the proposed Saving America by Saving the Family Act that would establish, listen to this, it's hard to believe, marriage camps with communal wedding ceremonies. Remember North Korea, financial rewards for completion and assigned mentors. The estimated cost of this was $280 billion over 10 years. Just think about that for a moment. $280 billion to push women into marriages, not to feed children, not to house families, but to perform weddings. Next. The middle class is not off the hook. Project 2025 extends its reach not only to other means-tested public assistance programs, but also to Social Security and unemployment insurance programs that serve the middle class. In the past, welfare state opponents cut benefits openly and directly. The authors of Project 2025 are much, much smarter. They favor what has been called backdoor benefit cuts. That means that benefits remain on paper, but shrink or vanish in practice through quiet erosion. And you may or may not, unless you study these programs, you're sort of involved with these programs, you may not even heard about this because it doesn't get public attention like welfare reform did. So the Social Security program has reduced staff, closed offices, and otherwise created processing delays that deny earned benefits to thousands without a word about a benefit cuts. Only when you go to the Social Security office and find it closed do you know about this. The Social Security Administration now has fewer employees than any time since 1967, when it served 52 million fewer beneficiaries then. This hits women hard. They now make up 51% of retired worker beneficiaries because so many of us are working, up from 12% in the 40s. Unemployment insurance follows the same playbook. Don't cut benefits on paper, just make the program impossible to navigate. For years, the program had administrative barriers, confusing websites, incomprehensible forms, long phone wait times that already delayed payments and stopped eligible people from applying. So Project 2025 just deepened all of this. It replaced civil servants with private contractors, removes federal responsibility standards, warns against granting UI benefits to immigrant workers, and otherwise hollows out the program from within. It also urged employers to reclassify workers as independent contractors, such as gig care and service workers, the majority of who are women. They bear the brunt because they're not covered. These jobs are not covered by the unemployment insurance program. And even private 401ks are on the table, potentially restructured. I think this is just a proposal, but it may become real, to favor married couples and single earner households over single people, cohabiting couples, and dual income families. I'm not sure how, but that's the idea. The strategy basically is death by 1,000 cuts. Next. So why do some people call Project 2025 an authoritarian playbook? Well, not to be dramatic, but because it meets the definition. So here's the story. Authoritarianism doesn't always arrive with tanks. Sometimes it sneaks in using legitimate means. For example, Project 2025 subscribes to the unitary executive theory. This is a legal theory that concentrates state power at the top and then uses the centralized power structures to enforce a particular social order. And this has been a favorite of John Roberts, the Chief Justice, since he worked for Reagan. And today, with the backing of the Supreme Court, Project 2025 has already expanded presidential control of the federal bureaucracy, as you know, replaced civil servants with loyalists, dismantled agencies, politicized the Department of Justice and the FBI, and is hollowing out the welfare state. Authoritarian regimes also enlist religion to legitimize hierarchy. Project 2025 inserts a biblically defined family into federal law and redirects funds, as I mentioned before, to faith-based service organizations that enforce obedience and order. And this is not incidental. None of this is incidental. It's all a planned strategy. Authoritarian regimes have long understood that families are where people first learn, or don't learn, to obey, conform, and accept hierarchy. Children raised to see male authority and prescribed gender roles as natural and God-given are much more likely, as you might expect, to accept unequal power as adults and less likely to resist leaders who demand submission. The United States is not yet an authoritarian state, but Project 2025 uses women and the family as levers to build a hierarchical, obedient social order. In authoritarian thinking, the family isn't just a social unit, it's a training ground. Next. Project 2025 is also a threat to democracy. Is it, I ask? And I say, yes, it is, and I'd like to explain. Most people think of the nation's turn to authoritarianism as via coup. That's how it would happen. But that is not the case today. Scholars of international scene call it democratic backsliding, the slow, incremental erosion of democratic norms and institutions by elected leaders who come to power legally and then use the power to make sure they stay. There's a book, I forget the author's name right now, called Democracy in Chains, which she details a lot of this. Each step looks small. A regulation changed here, and an office closed there, a word deleted from a government website. But, as you can imagine, the accumulative effect is profound. By the time people recognize or register what has happened, it may be too late to reverse the direction. This is, again, death by 1,000 cuts. And here is a scary number. As of February 2026, by some counts, approximately half of Project 2025's 532 domestic policy recommendations have been initiated or completed. We're not talking about a threat on the horizon. We are watching it unfold. Next, please. But wait, if that isn't enough, more recently, some more things have come to my attention. Have you heard of the Save America Act? Not the Save Families Act, the Save America Act. It is a textbook case of elected leaders changing the rules of the game to undermine democracy from within. The proposed new rule To register to vote in a federal election, you will need proof of U.S. citizenship, a passport or a birth certificate. Those are what you need. Sounds simple, sounds gender neutral. No, it's not. Here's the catch. First, not everybody has a passport. Millions of people or thousands of people don't have a passport. And if you're among the 69 million women who change their name, say at marriage, the birth certificate won't match your current legal name. You have to then get your marriage certificate. You face the added burden of to track down and reconcile both documents just to register. Trans voters face an equally stark choice. Revert their ID to a name that's gender they don't identify with, or lose the right to vote. This act is not about election security, as they claim. Documented voter fraud by non-citizens is totally rare. Rather, the act seeks to erect bureaucratic barriers that fall disproportionately on women, trans people, low-income voters, and communities of color. That's not a side effect, that's the point. Next. And here's another new one. The alarming household-only voting proposal. The idea, one person, the head of household, typically the husband, casts a single ballot on behalf of the entire family. That's the principle, one household, one vote. This would replace the basic democratic principle that we grew up on, one person, one vote. Validated, if not honored, for Black women since women won the vote. So this proposal shifts the unit of democratic representation from the individual citizen to the family unit. Your address votes, your family votes. You, as an individual, do not. So where does this come from? Well, it draws on three converting streams. First of all, traditionalist thinking, which holds that the family, not the individual, is the fundamental unit of society. Christian nationalism, which holds civic and political life should reflect the male-headed biblical family structure. And historic precedent echoes the old property-based voting rights when male landowners cast ballots on behalf of their entire household before women got the vote. So what does this mean for women? The proposal doesn't even pretend to be gender neutral. Women in male head households lose their independent political voice and right to vote. They are treated not as citizens, but as dependents absorbed into a husband's ballot. In effect, it repeals women's suffrage. Women who held their own households technically keep the vote, but by defining the male-led household as the norm, the proposal effectively sidelines single mothers, widows, and unmarried women. This is almost certainly unconstitutional. It directly conflicts with the 19th Amendment. Now, this was once a fringe idea, but I heard about it about a week ago, and I read an article in the New York Times. So it's no longer fringe if it's made it into the New York Times. And that alone should tell us something about where it might be headed. Next. I'm almost done. Project 2020's effort to dismantle or hollow out the welfare state is a textbook example of elected leaders undermine not only the welfare state, but democracy from within, changing the rules of the game to lock in inequality. I have spilled much ink over the years critiquing the welfare state as flawed and punitive, but that's precisely the point here. Its opponents want to work to keep it that way. They understand that a welfare state allowed to flourish, one that actually reduces poverty and shrinks inequality, would strengthen democracy itself. Just as Brandeis said it best, the quote's on the screen, we can have democracy in this country, or we can have wealth concentrated in the hands of few, but we can't have both. Next. So I'd like to end with something that might surprise you. Project 2025 is right about one thing. Access to welfare state benefits can be subversive to the family ethic and to state control over women. The welfare state was designed in part to constrain women, which we've detailed. But paradoxically, It has the potential to embolden them. So here's how. The British refer to cash benefits as a social wage because they function as an alternative to income from an employer or market wage. However meager, the social wage can reduce women's dependence on market income and on a male breadwinner. That is, it supports women's economic independence. Even this low financial floor can make it possible for women to leave unhappy or dangerous relationships, but also to become activists, to join movements, to organize, to push back. Think of the social wage as a strike fund for women. When you have nothing, there is little you can do. When you have even a little, you can fight. An independent woman is harder to control. A dependent one is much easier to govern. No wonder governments keep welfare state benefits so low. Next. The women I met in those Connecticut welfare offices were not passive. They were actually quite amazing. Despite the system designed to humble them, they found ways to take care of their kids, to survive, but also to resist individually and collectively. Around the country, women like them have banded together, this was in the past, and built the well-known welfare rights movement of the 1960s that almost brought the system to its knees. Benefits did not pacify them. Benefits gave them the ground to stand on. Project 2025 fears collective power. That is why it is hell-bent, I am convinced, on taking the welfare state down. Next. A final note. It's no coincidence that the welfare state and the vote are being rolled back at the very moment authoritarianism is on the rise. Aspiring autocrats have a good reason to fear women's political participation. Women activists consistently link their struggle for gender justice to the broader fight for democracy. And research also shows that social movements with large numbers of women tend to be more resilient, more creative, and ultimately more successful. The pattern is clear. Politically active women can become a direct threat to authoritarian leaders, and those leaders know it. They have every strategic reason to dismantle the welfare state and the vote as both sustained democracy and women's resistance. The future of democracy and the future of women's activism are not parallel stories. They go hand in hand. The powerful rarely surrender their privilege unless pressed from below. According to Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mimi. That was incredibly powerful, incredibly frustrating, and incredibly enlightening. And we have time for just a couple questions, but my question is, where is the progressive response to where's Project 2027, the response? Is there any organization or group that is working on this?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking
Oh,
you.
okay, well, I don't think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of this is attached to Project 2025. But I think I think there are lots of women's groups. I can't name them specifically because you don't hear about it a lot, but I think behind the scenes they're working about it. I'm hoping the Democratic Party is making their own Project 2028, 2026, 2027. This Project 2025 was it was written well ahead of the election, so they were ready to go. We saw how they flooded the zone immediately when Trump came to office. But I think what the other pushback is all what Indivisible and Mobilize are doing, getting people out in the streets to protest authoritarianism in its many forms. They may not be mentioned women's rights as much as there are other things, because other things they're more aware of. This stuff that I talked about is very embedded. People don't know what's happening. And so I talk about it to do my little bit to make it visible. But I think to the extent that actions, the No King's Days, the various resistance and, don't shop, don't work, May 1st day. I think they're all targeting the same authoritarian structures. And if they can be brought down, then we have a chance to get back to what the women's movement was trying to do, which was to undo the family ethic, not only in the welfare state, but throughout society.
Yeah. Do you think there is? Oh, and first, let me just tell folks, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Do you feel there is the political will and appetite to push as hard back on this as necessary?
On the family ethic or, against authoritarianism. I think
Yeah, both.
well, I think women's issues have been sidelined. So I think people are not thinking about them right now. But our job as social workers, given that we're predominantly women's field, we should pay more attention to this. I'm not sure that we are, but we should. And as I said, I think that if we can, just I think of the people in Minneapolis. I think of the people who are fighting. And there are many women are in the categories they are fighting. Many women are being deported. Women are, in being harmed by all the policies that I've mentioned and others. And men are being harmed by them too. So I think it's an uphill battle. I think things are going on. I feel a little encouraged by some of the current not the ones yesterday, but before yesterday, the Democrats winning these primaries. Um, it's hard to give a clear answer to that, Gary, as much as I would like to. And I think you know that when you asked me, because otherwise, if there was an answer, you wouldn't have asked me for it. Maybe someone in the audience has something to add to that. But I mean, I feel a little more optimistic these past couple of weeks than I did last month, just because some things seem to be turning around, approval ratings going down, and so on. But in terms of my topic today, I think maybe ISP could do something. I just had an idea to bring this up at the Macro United conference to get social workers interested in it, because I think we're fighting so many battles. We don't think of ourselves as in terms of our gender, and to fight those battles too. So maybe that's another way to get our social work organizations and our schools and our classes to pay more attention to it, because that's what woke people up last time around. So that's
No,
a
I agree.
possibility.
I agree. And Mimi, I just want to say too that you're one of the primary reasons we even have Macro United. In fact, you were the one that gave it that name. So
Right.
just so very excited to see how you've influenced so many different corners of the social work field. We have time for one more question. We're going to take it from our attendees. And it says, what tools other than organizing and advocacy might be necessary to resist these impositions on women in marginalized communities?
You want me to go to jail?
Well, do we need to, Mimi?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think we have to do. I've been in lectures where people have asked the speaker the same question, and they come up with the same answer I do. I think we have to do all the lobbying, all the legislative uh, things we social workers and macro has always done. But I think the big changes we have to get out in the streets more. I think only pressure from below is going to change this. They don't pay attention to the laws. Congress is ineffective. They're not. We can't play by the old rules. So we got to do something more dramatic, nonviolent, constructive, and yeah, I mean, I just think we have to do everything. And so some people like to lobby, some people like to protest, some people like picket signs, some people like memo pads, but I think we have to do all that stuff. And they're all really, really important.
Yeah.
And I just saw in the chat someone wanted to ask for the name of the book, so I forgot to show it before. Can you see it?
Yes, regulating the lives of women.
Social welfare policy from colonial times to the present. That's the cover.
Yep. Thank you. Mimi, let's please join me in sending some love and gratitude to our incredible speaker today. What a fantastic talk, Mimi. And it's always such a pleasure when I get to spend time with you. And I just want to again say how thankful I am for you to take the time to share all of this important information with us. I want to let the folks, the attendees, know that we will be posting this on the ISP website. I hope to have that posted on the resource page by mid next week is my goal, but don't hold me to that exact date. I'll do it as quickly as I can. And thank you, Allison, too, for all of your help and being here. It's always great to see you, and I'll see you at our next board meeting. So once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Mimi. Just
Well, thank
so.
you, and Macro United.
Yes, yes. We'll see you there. All right. Thank you, everyone.